Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope and pray that this video finds you well wherever you are. Today's video is going to be a little bit different, where I am going to be sharing with you some of my top 10 favorite faith-based movies or clean movies that I want you guys to go and check out in your free time. If you're like me, you probably are tired of finding movies that have some form of a demonic undertone, or they're perverted in nature, or they're just not what we should be consuming. And so I know that it is kind of difficult to find clean movies that may not necessarily be faith-based, but have, just a great storyline, and it's easy to follow, and it's appropriate to watch, and are even family friendly. And we are living in a day and age where a lot of the things that we see are around worldly things, such as killing and murdering and sex and drugs and all of the things. So because I know that I sometimes struggle to find clean, good movies that are not cheesy and low budget, I'm sure that I'm not the only one that struggles with this. So I wanted to share some with you guys today that you may not be aware of. So what I'm going to do in this video is just give you the title, give you the year when it came out, so you'll kind of know if it's a more recent movie or an older movie. And then I want to let you guys know who directed the movie, because I think that's important to give them their credit. As a disclaimer, I don't own any rights to any of these movies. I am not affiliated with any of these individuals. I felt like the Lord gave me the okay to share these movies with you guys as well. So I'm going to also give a brief synopsis. I don't want to spoil it for anybody that may have not watched these movies, but I do want to give you an understanding of, what the movie is about, so you'll be prepared. The first movie that we're going to talk about today, which is one of my favorite movies. I have watched this movie at least 2 to 3 times because I really love the soundtrack, is The Prince of Egypt. And many people are familiar with The Prince of Egypt, but this movie is a DreamWorks movie. It came out in 1998, and it was directed by several directors. It was 3 directors that I found, so I won't give their names here, but this is an animated film, and this is adapted from the book of Exodus, where we learn about the life of Moses and stuff like that. So The Prince of Egypt talks about how Moses, was saved when his mom put him in the basket, and he ended up being raised in Pharaoh's kingdom, but he ended up being the deliverer for God's people, which were the Israelites at that time. So I really love that movie. It gives a very interesting perspective on the battle between Moses versus Pharaoh. And if you're familiar with Exodus, you know all about the plagues that God sent against the people of Egypt because they would not let God's people go. So the soundtrack is amazing. I love that movie. It is also family friendly, so if you want to watch it with your kids or the little ones, that is something that you can watch. You do have to pay for this movie, so it's on YouTube for a small charge, and it is on other platforms for a small charge as well if you want to rent or if you want to buy. But in my opinion, I definitely think it's worth the investment. So yeah, the second movie is The Shack. This movie is actually on Netflix. If I'm not mistaken, it's also on Hulu. But this movie came out in 2017, and it was directed by Stuart Halsdine. So in this movie, it talks about the journey to forgiveness and really surrendering to God. This man loses his child to a predator, essentially, and it just goes through his journey of really letting go and letting God help him to heal, helping him to forgive, and really come back from the loss of his daughter. It's a movie that helps those to understand how to overcome unforgiveness, and how to really understand how sometimes God can allow bad things to happen because in his infinite wisdom and mercy, he knows all things, but it doesn't mean that he is not exempt from us understanding how we navigate our feelings and our emotions when it comes to grief and when it comes to dealing with forgiving someone, especially when someone we love has been murdered or killed in any accident or anything like that. Third movie, I'm gonna have to make sure I stay on track with my numbers, is God's Not Dead. So I had actually heard of this movie a few times before, but not gonna lie, when I was in the world, I was like, I don't want to watch no cheesy Christian movie. And even when I became a Christian, I was like, these movies be so cheesy and just kind of lame. The production's not there. But I actually just recently watched God's Not Dead. This movie came out in 2014, so they have a series of the God's Not Dead volumes, but the first one came out in 2014. It was directed by Harold Kronk, but this is a interesting movie where this young guy, he's a faith based individual, he's a Christian, he's in college, and the professor is a philosophy professor, and he is big on his belief of not believing in God. He says that he does not want to serve God, but he also pushes his belief and his anger and frustration with God onto his class. And so he makes his students literally write out God's dead on paper. And if you don't, write that out, then he pretty much intimidates you and tries to challenge you. And the young guy that was in his class, that is the Christian believer, he ended up taking on the challenge of defending his beliefs as a Christian. And there are other things that happen in this movie where there are other characters that are on this campus that deal with different circumstances and situations that all leads them to this concert and leads them to finding salvation. And I won't give away the concert at the end, but it's a really great movie, and it gives a perspective to those that are wanting to learn how to navigate being a believer in a worldly system, and what does that look like when it seems like everything is against you, yet God is with you. The fourth movie, which is one of my favorites, this movie is a little bit older, but this is One Night with the King, and this movie came out in 2006, and it was directed by Michael O. Sabgel. Michael, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name, but this movie is all about Esther, and so it gives a great perspective about the story of Esther and how she came from being a orphan to becoming a queen in the king's palace during that time. It also goes into detail about how she ended up saving her people. The next movie, which is a little more recent, is titled His Only Son, and this movie was produced by Angel Studios, which are the same individuals or the same group that produced the Chosen series. His Only Son came out in 2023, and it was directed by David Helling. It's about Abraham and the journey of Abraham having to sacrifice his son Isaac, and what that process really looked like in real time for him as an individual. This is a movie that helps those that are struggling with their faith, that are struggling to lay hold of a promise that God has given to them, yet it just seems like God is just taking his precious time with delivering on what he said that he would, and it ends up becoming a beautiful ending. And not only did they highlight Abraham's character, but they also gave a interesting perspective on Isaac's character, and I thought that was a really cool spin that I never even thought about. This movie can be found on the Angel Studios app, I actually saw this movie on Amazon Prime. And one thing that I want to do is just give a shout out to Amazon Prime for allowing the space for Christian movies to be there. The next movie that we're going to talk about, which is more recent as well, is called Left Behind. This movie just came out this year, 2024, as I'm recording this video. This movie was directed by Kevin Sorbo, and many of you guys that may follow Christian films may be familiar with Kevin Sorbo. If I'm not mistaken, he's a director, a Christian director, but he also acts in some of his movies. So he was actually the professor in God's Not Dead. But Left Behind is a very interesting movie about the end times and, you know, what that could look like when you are left behind. And it's a very, very interesting movie. And you know, I think that this is a good movie for those that may be struggling with family members that don't believe, and you're wanting to just maintain your faith while being around non-believers, or vice versa, where you're curious about God, you're trying to understand, you know, the book of Revelations or whatever the case may be, and you want something that can give you more of a visual depiction of what it is that you're reading. So I think Left Behind is a really great movie. It talks about the rise of what the Antichrist would look like, and this very interesting take on the mark of the beast and that system. Again, it's not to say that these movies are fully biblically accurate, but it's a good way for you to understand certain things throughout the scriptures that maybe you didn't know or maybe you didn't think about as you were studying. The next movie that I'm going to talk about, this movie is also a more recent movie. It's called On a Wing and a Prayer, and this movie has Dennis Quaid in it. I kind of am pretty familiar with actors and actresses, but Dennis Quaid is the guy from The Parent Trap, for, you know, anybody that may want to know. And he's played in other movies, of course, but I remember him from The Parent Trap with Lindsay Lohan. But this movie is titled On a Wing and a Prayer, which is based on a true story. This movie came out in 2023, and it was directed by Sean McNamara, pronouncing the last name correctly. This movie is based on a true story about how this family was on a flight, and the pilot dies on the flight, and was kind of tragic. They were coming back to their home state from a funeral. So the guy's brother passed away. They went down to Florida to, you know, clean out the house and, you know, go to the funeral and all the things. And they are now on a flight back to their home state. And this was a private plane, because the brother that passed away was a pilot. And so they were able to fly back on a private plane. Well, there is the brother, his wife, and his two daughters that are now flying back home from the funeral, and they are just going through the motions, and all of a sudden the pilot dies on the plane. So the pilot that was flying this plane, he died suddenly. So the remainder of the movie is about how God helped Dennis Quaid, who is the main character, his wife, land this plane, and how different people came together. Is The Sound of Freedom. And this movie is really, really gut-wrenching in my opinion. It definitely gets you thinking. This movie came out in 2023 and was directed by Alejandro Monteverde. And this movie is about sex trafficking, and how this individual, which is based on a true story, he went to literally like deep off in this island to save this girl that had been sex trafficked. Her brother had also been sex trafficked as well, unfortunately. But this movie is a very powerful movie. It gives you a true understanding of what the reality of sex trafficking is like. And I think I have to be careful on YouTube because I don't want to get censored or anything like that for talking about anything inappropriate. But It's a very heavy movie to watch, so please, as a disclaimer, be aware of that if that is triggering for you. Sound of Freedom is number 8. I've kind of lost track of my numbers, but movie number 9 is Prophet Suddenly. And this movie was actually recommended to me by a sister in Christ, and this movie is actually on YouTube. It came out in 2023, and it was directed or produced by this couple known as the Winlows. They are African, I believe, and this movie is an African movie. So this movie really just changed my perspective on, what true ministry should and shouldn't look like. There's a man of God that wants to thrive in ministry so bad, to the point to where he engages with forces of evil to get demonic powers so that he can pimp people in ministry for money and fame and different things like that. Long story short, he ends up losing his mind once the force of evil was done with him. That was it. And so, he lost his wife, they lost their child. It was just a lot that went into everything, where they started at the top. And when you are working with the enemy, you always think you're at the top, but once he's done with you, he's done with you, and you end up losing more than what you ever put in. So Prophet Suddenly is a very interesting movie. I think this is a great movie for those that want to understand what does true ministry look like. When you are walking with God moves on his timing, and most times, for most of us, we feel like he ain't moving quick enough, but he knows what he's doing. And so this is a warning movie to not be deceived by false prophets and false teachers, but also to be okay with your path as you are on your journey to becoming whatever it is that you want to become, especially if you are called to ministry. And then the final movie is Let There Be Light. This movie was directed by Kevin Sorbo, which I've already mentioned in this video, but this movie came out in 2017, and this is a story about a man, Kevin Sorbo, his wife in waking life, and his children in waking life actually play all of the characters in the movie, which I thought was really cool. But Kevin Sorbo and his waking wife, they actually end up divorced. In the movie, they lost their son, and I think that the main character, Kevin Sorbo, he took it really hard. So he ended up just kind of like just destroying everything through alcoholism, and he ended up becoming this best-selling author that was an atheist, and he just pushed how he didn't believe in the Lord and all these different things. Well, long story short, he has this powerful encounter where he saw his son in heaven, and his son said, "Let there be light," and he was on this quest to try to figure out what does this message mean. And he's at the top, financially speaking, because he's a top performing author. He has all of what people would think you would want, but now that he's had this experience, he now realizes that God is real, and that what he had built his thesis on has been a lie. It's a lot of restoration throughout this movie. So I think this is a good movie for those that want to see what restoration in a marriage, in a relationship, and even in someone's faith can look like. No one is ever too far from God that they can't be reached, and God can reach anybody that he wants to reach. And one last point that I want to make when it comes to Let There Be Light, as well as On a Wing and a Prayer, what I loved about these movies is that the wives were highlighted in a beautiful way. A lot of times when we have different marriages and things reflected in the Christian community, usually it's always focusing on the man and the man as the head. And I am not saying that I'm against men being in their leadership roles. It's not about that, but wives play a powerful role that I think sometimes is not given the full credit that's due. And so I love that in the movies Let There Be Light, as well as On a Wing and a Prayer, the power of a wife came into play that really gave her husband the strength, or their husbands the strength that they needed to get to the place that God wanted them to be. So these are my top 10 faith-based movies right now that I would recommend to anybody to go and watch. But I hope and pray that this video would, give you guys something that's entertaining to watch. I do believe that all of these movies are pretty family oriented, where you can teach your children about different things. Maybe a Sound of Freedom, you may want to be mindful of that one, just because it is talking about a very sensitive topic. But at the end of the day, it's good to be aware of what is the reality of our world, unfortunately. So I hope and pray that this video was helpful for you guys. And your next movie night with your brothers or sisters in Christ or your family, you can check out one of these movies. But until next time, try to make the world a better place today.